exhaustion you feel in your bones cannot be cured by sleep. It is the deep structural fatigue of a resource being mined to depletion. You exist in a neo-feudal extraction zone, offering up your time, your talent, and your energy to people who possess a fraction of your intellect but double your ruthless entitlement. You watch them ascend while you remain anchored to the floor, drowning in the leftovers of their affection. You have convinced yourself this is nobility. You believe your boundless generosity is a virtue that will eventually be recognized, rewarded, and returned. It will not. In the cold calculus of human hierarchy, uncontrolled generosity is not read as love. It is processed as an open vault. It is a strategic vulnerability. When you give without the threat of a boundary, the subconscious minds around you do not see a saint. They see a peasant offering uncompensated emotional labor to the crown. People do not respect what is free. They consume it until the well is dry, and then they discard the empty vessel. If you want the hemorrhaging to stop, you must abandon the moral delusions that keep you enslaved. You must kill the nice persona. You are currently operating as a non-player character, a utility in someone else's empire. To shift from the prey to the architect of your own reality, you must understand a fundamental law of power. Your utility is not your value. Your utility is the leash they use to walk you. To be harmless is not a moral triumph. It is the definition of prey. Look at the biological architecture of respect. In the wild apex, predators do not hunt one another for sport. The caloric cost and the risk of lethal retaliation are simply too high. A lion targets the slow, the weak, and the defenseless. When you present yourself to the world as entirely harmless, always agreeable, eternally available, perpetually smiling, and incapable of offense, you are broadcasting a biological signal of safety. You think you are telegraphing virtue. The primitive brain of your observer, hardwired by millions of years of dominance, hierarchies, receives a completely different message: zero consequences. And where there is no threat of a consequence, there can be no respect. Authority bias dictates that human beings only revere the implicit threat of overwhelming force. The people you respect most are not the ones who bend to your every whim. You respect them because they possess a line, and you know instinctively that crossing that line triggers a disproportionate reaction. They possess the capacity for destruction. True virtue, as understood by the emperors of Rome and the strategists of antiquity, is not powerlessness. A rabbit cannot be virtuous. It is peaceful only because it lacks the teeth to be anything else. True virtue requires having the claws, the fangs, the absolute capability to burn a relationship to ash, and consciously choosing measured peace. If you are being used, it is because you have shown the world a toothless smile. You are not a martyr. You are a manipulator running a failed scam. You view yourself as the victim of a cruel world, but you are the architect of your own subjugation. You are operating on a covert psychological contract, an asymmetric strategy of warfare employed by vassals trying to avoid the whip. The contract dictates that if you hide, your needs swallow your anger, and serve flawlessly, the world is obligated to love and protect you. But you forged this contract in the dark of your own mind. You never presented it for a signature. Now you seethe with resentment because the hierarchy is not paying out the dividends you secretly expected. This is the zygonic effect weaponized against your own soul, an open loop of unmet emotional debts rotting you from the inside. You're not giving freely. You are loaning your obedience with a staggering interest rate, and when they default on the currency of validation, your bitterness leaks out. It manifests in passive-aggressive sighs, heavy silences, and the unmistakable stench of resentment. This odor makes you repulsive. It strips away whatever lingering respect they held for you. In the economics of human interaction, your infinite availability has driven your market value to zero. Air is vital, but it is free, so it is ignored. Gold is practically useless, but it is scarce, so men bleed for it. You have chosen to be air. You must become gold. The most terrifying sound to a parasite is the sudden silence of its host. Human beings are biologically wired for loss aversion. The fear of losing a resource overrides the desire for gaining one. Currently, nobody fears losing you because your presence is guaranteed. You are a fixture, a lamp in the corner of the room, useful when the darkness falls, entirely invisible when the sun rises. If you want to command the room, you must learn the weaponized use of the void. Historically, the Medicis and sovereign monarchs understood that calculated absence manufactures both desire and paranoia. When you feel the familiar sting of exploitation, your conditioned instinct is to surge forward, to over-explain, to demand validation, to ask them to recognize your sacrifice. Kill that instinct. Instead, pull your energy entirely off the table. Initiate an extinction burst in the manipulator. When your attention is suddenly severed, they will experience a psychological vacuum. They will reach out asking if you are angry, probing to see if their appliance is broken. Do not rush to reassure them. Hold the void. Ambiguity is an offensive weapon. Clarity is a defensive weakness. When you are an open book, you tell your enemies exactly which pages to tear out. Let the silence hang heavy. Let the dead leaves of your one-sided relationships detach and fall. Solitude is the fortress of the sovereign. It is vastly superior to the crowded misery of a servant. A bridge is only useful if you possess the matches to burn it down. To achieve psychological sovereignty, you must integrate your Jungian shadow. You must cultivate a chilling capacity for detachment. The principle of least interest dictates the iron law of all human dynamics. The entity that cares the least controls the entire frame. If you are fundamentally unable to walk away from a job, a negotiation, or a relationship, you are a hostage. And hostages are always bled dry. To walk away, you must birth a calculated ruthlessness against your own addiction to comfort. You must prefer the freezing chaos of the unknown over the suffocating warmth of a cage. This demands the integration of your aggression. Aggression is not mindless violence. It is the sovereign momentum required to construct unmovable walls. When someone steps across your line, do not scream. Do not plead. Lock eyes with them in absolute dead stillness and state that their behavior is unacceptable. Then stop talking. The tactical application of the unbroken gaze is a tool of elite power. It forces the trespasser into a psychological deficit. They will scramble, they will laugh nervously, they will attempt to project their guilt onto your sensitivity. Do not flinch, let them drown in the silence. In that singular moment of unbroken tension, their subconscious will permanently recategorize you from an exploitable resource to a dangerous equal. Your anxiety is a currency you are paying to fund their comfort. You are thoroughly addicted to external regulation. If the people around you are displeased, your internal citadel collapses. You rush to metabolize their negative emotions because you lack the structural integrity to stand alone in their displeasure. This must end. You must forge cognitive sovereignty. When a manipulator attempts to hook you with guilt, to weaponize your empathy against you, you must become the gray rock. Flat tone, dead eyes, an impenetrable surface offering absolutely zero emotional friction. I will not be able to do that favor. When they press for an explanation, demanding to know why you are suddenly so selfish, do not offer them the ammunition of an excuse. I understand you are frustrated, but the answer remains no. You are no longer engaging in a debate. You are dictating a fact of reality. Gravity does not explain itself to the falling man. It simply pulls. You must stop justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining. When you strip them of your emotional reaction, you starve their toxicity of oxygen. You observe them as a technician observes a predictable mechanism. You watch the strings of guilt and silent treatments attempt to attach to you, and you simply refuse the connection. You step entirely off the board. To build a skyscraper, you do not ask the wind for permission. You have fatally confused proximity with value. You operate under the delusion that being indispensable makes you cherished. It only makes you a tool. A helper begs for gratitude, living on the scraps of validation thrown from the high table. A builder constructs their own table and dictates the price of admission. What exactly are you building? Are you forging your own intellect, your own capital, your own physical dominance? Or are you merely carrying bricks to fortify someone else's empire? When you pivot your obsession toward your own sovereign mission, your availability instantly vanishes. You do not need to fake scarcity. The physics of your momentum naturally restrict access to you. A skyscraper does not compromise its structural steel to accommodate the shifting breezes. It stands rigid, and the world is forced to redirect around it. This architectural shift from nice guy to sovereign builder filters out the parasites. Parasites require stagnant water and open wounds. They cannot attach to a moving locomotive. Create a velvet rope around your existence. The only currency accepted at the door is absolute reciprocity and unwavering respect. If they lack the funds, they remain outside. You feel no guilt locking the gate because you finally recognize the premium value of the fortress within. The heaviest chain around your neck was forged by your own apologies. There is no sin more destructive than self-betrayal. Every single time you utter a yes when your nervous system screams no, you are replicating the psychological destruction of the Milgram experiment upon yourself. You are actively electrocuting your own self-worth simply to obey the unearned authority of societal expectations. This is the root of your exhaustion. You are a casualty in a war between the sovereign consciousness that wants to conquer and the enslaved conditioning that wants to submit. You must declare absolute war on disrespect, even if it requires becoming the villain in their localized narrative. They will brand you as cold. They will accuse you of selfishness. They will mourn the loss of the old you. Agree with them. Strip their weapons of all kinetic energy by adopting Machiavellian indifference. Guilt requires your psychological consent to function. Shame is only effective if you bow your head. When you meet their accusations with a cold shrug and total acceptance of the villain title, you neutralize their entire arsenal. You elevate yourself to a tier of power they cannot touch. The price of universal popularity is deep, simmering self-hatred. It is a cost you will no longer bear. You will walk into rooms unconcerned with their judgment. You will deny unreasonable demands with a serene, unbothered smile. You will become untouchable. Truth is not democratized. It is heavily guarded. The world does not reward the meek. It is violently indifferent to your suffering. It bends only to leverage structural power and the terrifying gravity of those who ruthlessly respect themselves. You teach the hierarchy how to process you, not through tearful conversations, but through the brutal finality of your actions. Through the lines you draw in concrete, the moments you coldly withdraw your presence, and the suffocating silence you weaponize against disrespect. You must execute your former self without hesitation. That compliant, desperate ghost was keeping you small in a reality that requires you to be sovereign. The algorithms of this platform are designed to pacify you, suppressing the most lethal applications of dark psychology, the true defenses against sociopathic targeting, and the deep, unvarnished shadow work required to command hierarchies. The keys to the citadel are not distributed to the masses. The join button below is not merely a transaction, it is a psychological threshold. It separates the intellectual peasantry content to splash in the shallow, safe waters of motivation from the few who are prepared to wield real power. If you require a weapon rather than a comforting lie, step behind the wall. The deep water is waiting.